It was just another ordinary morning when I walked to the mailbox, still groggy from lack of sleep. The world outside seemed unchanged, as though nothing could disrupt the calm of my routine. I sifted through the usual bills and junk mail, but then I saw a letter with my name on it, handwritten in a familiar, yet somewhat detached script. It was from my sister. My heart skipped a beat, as I hadn't heard from her in weeks, and our relationship had been strained ever since the fallout over the business. But even then, I never expected this. I opened the envelope slowly, almost hesitant to discover its contents. As I read the first few lines, my stomach dropped. "I'm taking over the family business. You're out." Those words burned into my brain. I reread them, certain that I had missed something, some clue that would explain the sudden decision. But no, it was as simple and cruel as it seemed. The family business, the one we'd both worked so hard to build together, was no longer mine to share. My sister, in one swift motion, had claimed it for herself. I stared at the paper for a long time, my thoughts racing. I wanted to scream, to throw the letter away and pretend it never existed, but the cold weight of betrayal held me in place. How could she do this? We had been partners, both equally invested in the future of the business, or so I thought. The silence from her end only deepened the wound. No explanation, no reasoning, just this stark, final message. I felt an overwhelming wave of confusion and hurt. The family business, the very thing that had defined so much of my life, was now slipping through my fingers. I couldn't comprehend what had happened, or how I had missed the signs that led to this moment. All I knew was that this letter wasn't just about the business, it was about everything we'd built together, everything I thought we'd shared. And now, it seemed like all of that meant nothing to her. As I sat there, holding the letter with trembling hands, memories of the family business came flooding back. I couldn't help but replay the moments when everything had started, when it was just the two of us, my sister and me, dreaming of what we could build together. I remember when we were kids, helping Dad around the small shop after school. He always had that spark in his eye when he talked about the future, a future that one day, he hoped, would belong to us. I watched my sister, always the one to take charge, always the one to dream big, and I admired her for it. She had a way of seeing potential where others only saw limitations. She was the one who pushed me to work harder, to stay focused. And I followed, every step of the way, believing that we were in this together. But somewhere along the line, something changed. The more success we achieved, the more distant she became. The decisions that were once made together, in partnership, began to be made by her alone. I never questioned it after all. She was my sister, and I trusted her. But now, reading her words, I realized just how much I had missed. I remember the late nights spent in the back office, strategizing, planning the next big move. I remember the excitement we both felt when we opened our first second location. It was a victory we shared, a milestone that I thought would bind us even closer. But with each passing year, her ambitions seemed to outgrow mine, and I was left trailing behind, unsure of when the partnership I believed in had started to crumble. Now, in the wake of her letter, all those memories felt like they had been erased in an instant. All the effort, the sacrifices, the late nights, the dreams we had spun together, all of it seemed irrelevant. In the end, it was all just a stepping stone for her to take over. It hurt to think about how easily everything had shifted in her mind. Was it always going to be this way? Was I just a pawn in her grand plan? The weight of that question settled heavily on my chest, and I could almost hear the echoes of all those late-night talks we had, now tainted by the reality of the situation. My sister and I were always more than just family. We were partners in crime, best friends, and allies. Growing up, then we shared everything: our dreams, our secrets, and our ambitions. There was an unspoken understanding between us, an unbreakable bond that made me believe that nothing could ever come between us. We didn't just build a business together, we built a life. I admired her in ways I couldn't put into words: her confidence, her drive, the way she could take charge in any situation. It was easy to follow her lead because, deep down, I believed that her success was my success too. But somewhere along the way, I began to notice subtle changes. At first, it was small things, decisions made without consulting me, meetings held without me, and conversations that ended with her reassuring me that everything was under control. I convinced myself that she was just doing what was best for the business, that the growing pains were a natural part of any successful venture. But as time went on, I began to feel more like an outsider in something I had helped create, something I had poured my heart into. I tried to talk to her about it, tried to remind her of how we started this together, how much I still cared about our shared vision. But each time, the conversation felt like it was being shut down before it could even begin. She would brush it off with a smile, telling me I was overthinking things, that everything was fine. But it never felt fine. The more I tried to reach out, the further she seemed to pull away. The gap between us widened, and what once felt like a partnership began to feel like a one-sided affair. And then came the letter, the final blow that shattered everything. It wasn't just the words on the page that hurt, it was the realization that all this time, I had been living in a version of our relationship that only existed in my head. I thought we were partners, but in her eyes, I was always just a stepping stone, someone who was dispensable when the time came. The sister I had always trusted, the one I had shared everything with, was now a stranger. Her decision to take over the family business, to push me out, wasn't just a business move, it felt personal, like a betrayal of everything we had been through together. I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to us. Had we always been drifting apart, and I was too blind to see it? Or was this moment the culmination of years of unspoken resentment and unmet expectations? It was hard to even comprehend that the person I had once shared everything with now saw me as someone she could just cast aside. I sat there, staring at the letter in my hands, as if the words might change if I looked at them long enough. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The shock of it hit me like a cold wave crashing down, freezing me in place. It didn't seem real. How could my sister, the person I had shared everything with, suddenly decide that I was no longer welcome in our family business? The more I read, the more my mind raced, and the deeper the pit in my stomach grew. This wasn't just a letter. It felt like the end of everything we had worked for, the end of a relationship I thought was unbreakable. My initial reaction was disbelief. I kept telling myself it had to be a mistake, that there must be some kind of misunderstanding. Surely she didn't mean what she had written. I searched for any hint of sarcasm, any sign that this was some kind of joke or a bad decision made in the heat of the moment. But there was nothing. Her words were clear, deliberate, and final. I'm taking over the family business. You're out. No room for negotiation. No second chances. Just an abrupt, cold statement that left me feeling like I was standing on the outside of everything I had built with her. As I reread the letter, anger started to replace the shock. How could she do this to me? How could she just push me aside like I didn't matter? This wasn't just about the business. This was about our history, our bond. The anger was overwhelming, and I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. I'd worked so hard to get to this point, and now she was taking it all away without even a conversation. It was as if my years of dedication, my sacrifices, didn't even count. But beneath the anger, there was a deep sense of sadness. I felt betrayed, not just professionally, but personally. The person I had trusted the most had made a decision without even giving me the chance to fight for my place, without even considering the history we shared. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I thought about calling her, about confronting her, and demanding an explanation. But then I wondered, what was the point? What could I possibly say that would make this right? My emotions were all over the place. I felt a whirlwind of confusion, betrayal, and loss. In that moment, I didn't know where to go or what to do next. The future I had once envisioned, working side by side with my sister, had suddenly vanished, and I was left to pick up the pieces, trying to figure out how to move forward when everything I had known was shattered. The days after I received the letter felt like a blur, each one dragging by, heavy with uncertainty and frustration. I knew I had to confront her. Sitting in my apartment, I couldn't avoid it any longer. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed her number. The moment it rang, I felt a rush of anxiety flood through me, but I knew this conversation was unavoidable. She had to explain herself. She had to tell me why. When she finally picked up, there was a long pause on the other end. "Hello." Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she wasn't sure what to say. I didn't give her the chance to avoid it. "Why, Rachel," I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I expected. "Why did you do this? You didn't even give me a chance to explain. You just took everything. The business, our future, and our relationship, gone." Just like that. I could hear her sigh on the other end, a sound that only made my frustration boil. "I didn't mean for it to come to this," she replied, her voice quieter now. I thought it was for the best. "You've been distant lately, and I didn't think you wanted it anymore." I felt my anger surge, but I forced myself to keep calm. Distant Rachel. I've been working day and night to keep this business running. You know that. I didn't back away. You're the one who's been distant. There was a bitter edge to my words now, but I couldn't stop it. I thought we were partners. I thought we were in this together, but I guess I was wrong. There was another long pause before she spoke again. "I didn't want to hurt you, but the business is growing, and I had to make a decision. I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to take control." Her words stung, cutting deeper than I expected. It wasn't just the business she was taking control of, it was everything we had built together, everything I thought we had. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of her decision pressing down on me. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "You just decided for both of us. No discussion, no understanding. Just one letter, and I'm out." "I didn't want to lose you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper now, but I felt like I had no choice. I needed to do what was best for me. Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I had never felt so abandoned, so alone. And what about what's best for us? I snapped back, the tears I had been holding back threatening to spill over. What about our bond? Our trust? Doesn't that mean anything to you? There was a long silence, and I could tell she was struggling with her own emotions. Finally, she spoke. softer now. "I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, but I think I made the right choice for me." The conversation ended there, and I was left with nothing but an aching emptiness. Her words lingered in my mind, but there was no resolution, no sense of closure, just a painful silence that felt louder than anything we had said. After the phone call, the weight of everything hit me harder than I could have expected. I sat there, in the quiet of my apartment, replaying every word of the conversation with Rachel over and over again. There was a dull ache in my chest, a mixture of betrayal and confusion. I had always believed that family came first, that no matter what happened, we could weather any storm together. But now, with her decision to take the business without me, it felt like everything I had worked for, everything we had built together, had been torn away in an instant. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The reality of the situation settled over me like a thick fog. I had spent so much time building my life around the business, around the future I envisioned for us both. But now I was forced to confront a painful truth. I had let my identity become too wrapped up in something that was no longer mine to claim. Rachel had made her choice, and I had to make mine. Sitting alone with my thoughts, I realized that I had been holding on to something for far too long: my pride, my fear of change, and maybe even my fear of facing who I really was outside of the family business. For so long, I had defined myself by what I did, by the work I put into that company. It wasn't just a business, it was my legacy, my connection to everything I had ever known. But now, I had to let go of that. I had to figure out who I was without it. The uncertainty was suffocating. What would I do next? Where would I go? I couldn't just sit here and wait for things to get better. I had to take control of my life again. For the first time in years, I had a chance to rebuild away from the shadow of the business, away from the past. I needed to find my own path, my own purpose, and maybe even rediscover who I was before all of this. It wasn't easy to admit. I had spent so much time focused on the business, the family expectations, and my own fears of failure. But as I looked out the window, I realized that this was my opportunity to start fresh. It would take time, but I had to believe that this was the beginning of something new. I couldn't keep holding on to the past. It was time for me to let go, to let the future unfold in its own way. The pain of Rachel's decision didn't disappear in an instant. But it was a wake-up call, a moment that forced me to confront the truth I had been avoiding. I needed to heal, to grow, and to find my own way forward. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to reclaim my life. As days passed, the shock of Rachel's decision began to settle, but the emptiness lingered. I spent my time scrolling through old files, reviewing things that no longer felt important. But then, just when I was starting to question everything, an unexpected call came. It was from a former client, someone I hadn't heard from in years. He was starting a new project, a venture that had nothing to do with the family business, but everything to do with the skills I had developed over the years. "Listen," he said on the phone, "I know your situation, and I've got something that might be right up your alley. A new opportunity. It's not a family business, but it's exactly the kind of challenge I know you can handle. We need someone with your expertise." The words hit me like a gust of fresh air. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of excitement. This was it. The very thing I had been too afraid to pursue for so long: an opportunity outside of my family's shadow. An opportunity to prove to myself that I could succeed without leaning on the legacy of the business I had always known. I spent the next few days considering the offer carefully. The fear of stepping into the unknown was still there, gnawing at me. But so was the hope that this could be my chance to rebuild, to reinvent myself. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but at that moment, the idea of doing something for me, something that was mine and mine alone, was the only thing that felt right. When I called him back to accept the offer, I felt a wave of relief. This wasn't the end, as I had once feared. It was a new beginning. I didn't need the family business to define me anymore. I had something else, something that could stand on its own. I was no longer defined by Rachel's decision or the years of hard work I had put into the company. I had my own future to create. In a strange way, her choice had freed me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't beholden to anyone else's vision for my life. This was mine to shape, and I was ready to take that first step forward into a new world filled with unknowns but also infinite possibilities. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension. Rachel and I didn't speak much after our confrontation. It wasn't that we didn't want to. It was just hard to find the right words. The rift between us was not only about the business, but about years of unspoken expectations and misunderstandings. But as time passed, I began to realize that maybe this was a moment of reckoning for both of us. One afternoon, as I was going over the details of my new project, my phone rang. It was Rachel. I hesitated for a moment before answering. There was a soft but honest tone in her voice when she spoke. "I've been thinking about everything," she said, "about us, about what I did. I know it wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry." Her apology wasn't grandiose or dramatic. It was quiet, sincere, and real. It was everything I needed to hear, but didn't know I did. For so long, I had carried the weight of her decision as if it were a personal failure. But in that moment, I realized it wasn't. It was just a part of our journey, one that we both had to face. "I've been trying to figure out my place in all of this," I replied, "and I think I'm finally starting to understand. You're not the enemy here, Rachel. Neither am I. We're both just trying to find our way." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, she spoke softly. "I'm glad you understand. I think we've both been holding on to too much." For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The weight I had been carrying about the business, about my family, about Rachel seemed to lift just a little. I realized that reconciliation didn't have to mean that everything went back to the way it was. It didn't mean we had to both be in the same place, doing the same thing. It simply meant that we understood each other better now. We didn't have to fight anymore. We could both grow, each in our own way, without holding each other back. The future still felt uncertain, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. Rachel had her path, and I had mine. And maybe, just maybe, our paths would cross again in the future. Maybe we would find a way to rebuild what was broken, but only time would tell. What mattered now was that we were both ready to move forward, and that was enough. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of hope. The future was wide open, filled with possibilities for both of us. And this time, I wasn't going to let fear dictate my next move. I was ready to embrace whatever came next. As I look back on everything that happened, the letter, the confrontation with Rachel, the quiet days that followed, and the reconciliation, it's hard not to feel a sense of both closure and new beginnings. Life, it turns out, has a way of surprising us with its twists and turns, its challenges, and its moments of grace. What I once saw as a painful betrayal now feels like a stepping stone to a deeper understanding of myself and my relationship with Rachel. In the past, I would have never imagined that something so disruptive could lead to healing. The family business, the thing we'd both worked so hard to build, became a symbol of everything we had yet to understand about each other. It wasn't just about business anymore, it was about trust, growth, and the shared history that had always bound us. It wasn't perfect, but then again, nothing ever is. What I've learned through this journey is that perfection is less important than connection, and sometimes we have to let go of old expectations to make room for something more authentic. Rachel and I may never be the same as we were before. The dynamics of our relationship have shifted, and that's okay. But what's important is that we've learned to speak honestly, to apologize when needed, and to forgive not just each other, but ourselves. We've both grown, and that's all anyone can ask for. Looking forward, I'm no longer afraid of change. I've come to understand that the future is a constant evolution, and sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward. The family business will continue to evolve, as will my role in it. But what matters now is the lessons I've learned about resilience, about the power of communication, and the strength of forgiveness. I'm not the same person I was before all this happened, and I'm grateful for that. The future is uncertain, but it's no longer something to fear. With new clarity and newfound strength, I'm ready to embrace whatever comes next, whether it's with Rachel or on my own. What matters is that I've learned to trust myself and my ability to navigate the unknown. And that, more than anything, feels like a victory.